Welcome. Don and Debbie said they're happy to be here today. There's no other place they'd rather be than praising God in the church that they participate so dearly in, and we appreciate that. And for all of you that participate in this church and all the different activities, thank you for making our church body more full. And let's start today's worship with the song here.
I'm going to let the person that's supposed to be doing it do it. I know she loves doing it.
I do. It's one of my favorite things. Good afternoon, everybody. Announcements in your bulletin, if you open it up, all on here. Next week, we have potluck, and it is a sandwiches and salad theme, so that's exciting. And July's movie will be The Shack, which I've heard a lot of good things about. What? Oh, see, there we go. I read the book, but I haven't seen the movie. And then offering this week is for the Oregon Conference Youth Support. So if you put it in the basket but don't specify where it goes, it will go to the Oregon Conference Youth Support. So if you can bow your heads, we'll pray for the offering. Dear Jesus, thank you for today and thank you for this warm sunshine. I ask that you bless the offering that's collected today and help it be used as you see fit. In your name I pray, amen.
Amen. We're going to skip the children's story because it's just my daughter here, and I'm going to give her a good story when we get home. And okay, but what I would like the parents, if you're a parent in here, to do right now is either you can do it right now, or maybe when you get home, call your kid, call your son or your daughter, and just say hi and that you love them. And maybe you can send them a text right now. I wouldn't mind if you break out your phone and just tell your kid, the guy up on stage told me to say hi, and so I have to do it. No, but you're doing it because you love your kids. And I love my kids. So, sing Sweet Low, Swing Low. All right? Yeah. Thank you.
this service is going by fast, like lightning, right? But it is a warm day and very few number. I kind of get that, but Brian's going to lead a discussion here. We're going to do a 3-song praise, but in order to do that, we need to kind of like get our spirit up a little bit, right? And I mean, can anybody give me a reason right now why we're here, why we should praise God? We need Him, right? Who we are. Anybody else have a good reason?
This is a special day.
Because it's a special day. No kidding. Speaking of a special day, well, actually, Brian's going to talk about that, so I'm not going to go in there.
No, you go ahead. I'll just go for it.
Well, I mean, I was reading Revelation this week, okay?
That's not in my sermon, so you're good.
So if you want, just for a moment, let's turn to Revelation 14. We have to do something right now to lift our spirits up so that the praise we're about to give to God, is the most meaningful that we can make it. Revelation 14, verse 7 and 9. I need a headset to do this properly.
That could be arranged. We'll do that next time.
We're going to read this. There's a couple verses. All right. So let's go to verse 7 and 9. Find it here. All right. He said in a loud voice, this is part of the 3 angels' message that we know as Adventists very well. He said in a loud voice, "Fear God, give Him glory, because the hour of His judgment has come. Worship Him who made the heavens, the earth, the sea, and the springs of water." And clearly, part of the 3 angels' message is about what? What worship? It is. Worship is probably one of the things that we can do on this earth that we can take to heaven. But more importantly, worshiping means that our focus is on, says here, the Creator. And I don't know if there's anything that explains who God is. I mean, if you want to put His seal on anything, it would be His creation, wouldn't it? Because it all started with that. I mean, it shows His power. It shows that He's almighty. And I know you're going to speak of the Sabbath, but Sabbath is about creation.
That's in my discussion.
Yeah,
so.
we won't go there.
Right.
But it's
We'll go there later. Good.
Yeah, we'll make sure we get there. Romans 1:20. You guys probably know that verse very well. Because from the things that He's made, it can be clearly seen in His divine nature, His eternal power, so that man is without excuse. Again, creation. End time issue is worship, and worship the Creator. There's only one being that created everything. If we go to Revelation 7, we're going to read verse 9 and 10 real quick. So, Revelation speaks a lot about worship in chapter 4. It really sets up a scene where we have God sitting on a throne, and out of it's coming lightning and peals of thunder. Around Him are 24 more thrones, And there's 24 elders with gold crowns. And then there's these 4 beasts. And these 4 beasts, one's like a lion, one's like an ox, one's like an eagle, and one's like a human. And they have 6 wings, and they have eyes all around them. And I don't know what they mean. But when you read those verses, after John describes who they are in the presence of God, the next thing they're doing is they're proclaiming worship to God. So their purpose partly was to worship God. And if we read, so we have a part in that too. Someday in chapter 7, verse 9, after this I looked, and there before me was a great multitude that no one could count, from every nation, tribe, people, and language, standing before the throne and in front of the Lamb. They were wearing white robes and were holding palm branches in their hands. And they cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation belongs to our God who sits on the throne and to the Lamb." And this is something we can do right now. We don't have our white robes on. We have a process to go through to that. But we certainly can worship, because evidently it's an important part of end-time events is who our allegiance is to in worship. But it also is something that we'll be doing for eternity. So I just ask you now, let's stand and worship God together.
You
Father. Thank you so much for being such a awesome God. Thanks you so much for putting us in this life. So to make it so easy for us to see your presence, if it's just in your creation alone, we see it everywhere. We're in awe. And you being the author of creation puts us in awe of you. And when we're in awe of you, Lord, we're ripe to explore your love. And as we explore your love, Lord, we realize that we just we aren't quite true to you. We ask for your forgiveness in that. And your love covers that all that up perfectly. And as we experience that, we realize that our endeavor in this life is to share that with others. So many people need to hear that it isn't the works, the acts, and all of the things that we think us Christians are righteous because. It's because we understand you're an awesome God that created us to admire you and to receive your love. Thank you so much, Lord, for that message. And be with Brian as he's about to arrange a panel here. And continue to pray for Dale and Simona, and Sean, Nicole, and Stephanie, and Jody, and all of those that are overseas doing ministry work and experiencing events that where you've been. I can't wait, Lord, that you'll give Dale some good messages from this time that he has in Israel. And pray for all those that are sick and so need your loving healing, Lord. There's so many people out there. I know you hear them. And we trust our faith. Thank you in our faith in you. Thank you so much. Amen.
Thanks, Ron. Exodus chapter 20, verse 8. I'm going to read this. I think most of you know this. This is one of the commandments. It says, verse 8 in chapter 20, "Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is the Sabbath of the Lord your God. In it you shall do no work. You, nor your son, nor your daughter, nor your male servant, nor your female servant, nor your cattle, nor a stranger who is within your gates. For in 6 days the Lord made the heavens and the earth, and all that is in them, and rested the seventh day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and hallowed it." You guys ever heard of Silk soy milk? Yeah? Okay. Silk soy milk has an interesting history behind it. As you may know, Silk soy milk doesn't need to be refrigerated. It can actually go in your pantry and just be fine. So the grocery stores were stocking Silk soy milk just in the middle section of the store where it wasn't refrigerated, and it wasn't selling. Nobody knew it was there. It was just kind of this odd thing that said Silk, and maybe some hardcore vegetarians or Seventh-day Adventists were checking out soy milk. But somebody had an interesting idea. It was a marketing idea. They decided, let's put the soy milk next to the regular milk in the refrigerator section. So you've got your milk. You got milk, soy milk, Silk soy milk. And it just started flying off the shelves. Why? Because it was different. And what made it different? I mean, it was a totally different product. It was made out of soy. It wasn't made out of animal milk. The carton looked very similar, but you could tell it apart, and the people were buying it in the refrigerator section. So, what sets us apart from the normal person in society? What sets you apart from your neighbor? What sets you apart from your coworker? What sets you apart from maybe a family gathering where you have all kinds of different backgrounds of religious beliefs? Think about that. So I think because the fact that we're all here on a Saturday, we could pretty much all agree that Saturday is meant for the Sabbath. And so we're not going to get into a discussion as to what is the appropriate day of the week to have Sabbath. I think that can be a whole other discussion. But I want to ask why and how we keep the Sabbath. I'd like you to think about this past week, because the Sabbath is a rhythm of 7 days. We got 6 days where we work, and then 7 days or seventh day where we rest. I want you to think of 3 things in your life during this past week where something good happened or you did something good. So just think about that. Now I want you to think about 3 things that God did in your life, where God did something good. And it wasn't because of anything that you did. It was because you knew for sure that it was something that God did. Let's look at Genesis chapter 2, verse 2. Genesis chapter 2, verse 2, we'll get 2 and 3. And on the 7th day, God ended his work which he had done, and he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had done. Then God blessed the 7th day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. Now, God had, just prior to that, created man. And the days before that, God had created the heavens and the earth, and he created the fishes in the sea and the birds in the air and the animals on the land. He created everything. And then towards the end, he created man. Now, was man working that whole time? Had man been toiling? Had man been working right before the first Sabbath? I would say no. Man wasn't even created yet, and yet God had the first Sabbath before we even had to work. So there's another whole meaning behind the Sabbath there, and it's a time where we stop and rest in the whole rhythm of the week. You guys think of 3 things in your life this past week that God did or that you did? And does anybody want to share anything special that happened this week? Awesome. I can walk around. Get my exercise for today. Awesome. Yes.
Is it on?
It's on. What's your name?
Debbie.
Debbie.
Yes.
Go ahead.
This week, we had bunny problems.
Bunny?
In court. Bunny.
Okay.
And it was going around eating everybody's produce, and because everybody's real plant happy in my court. We all do vegetables every year. and this bunny was wreaking havoc. And you could tell that this bunny was domestic. Somebody somehow let it loose, or it got loose, but it was the cutest thing, but still, it was wreaking havoc. Anyway, I was blessed with some beautiful plants, beautiful flowers, and also my neighbor across the way gave me some zucchini. So I was like, oh, what a blessing, how nice. And so I was really afraid to plant them, but I did. And that bunny, oh man, just tore up one of my beautiful flowers. So I was like, okay, we got to catch this. So somebody got a cage. Anyway, it ended up under my house. And so my neighbor's son came, and he's just very determined, very, very determined to get that bunny. So anyway, to make a very long story, trust me, he got the bunny, and we were playing with it. It's just adorable. It's so pretty, and it's gray, but thank the Lord the bunny is gone, because I was just blessed with 3 beautiful tomato plants. So now I can really have a whole front end of my house. And plus I was blessed with 2 more beautiful flowers. So all free, even the soil, the pots, everything. So I was like, wow, what a blessing, because in front of my house was a little plain. I didn't have the money to fix it up, but it was like the Lord knew my desire, that I really loved the beauty. I loved to look at it. I appreciate it immensely. And now I have all of this beautiful hanging fuchsias and begonia, everything. I mean, just a wide variety in my front yard now, and it is so beautiful. So that's my blessing.
Amen.
I got the bunny, and I got all these free plants.
Now, when you say the bunny's gone, it just, somebody took it. It's not like soup or anything.
No.
Right? Okay.
No, we actually caught it in a cage, and guess what they used the rest of my flower plant to lure it in there?
Uh-huh.
But that's okay.
Well, that's what it's wanted. That's what it wanted,
He
right?
loved it. Yeah,
okay.
he loved it. We were playing with it, and you could tell he's real domesticated. Somebody let that bunny loose out there.
Did you
and-
name it?
No,
No.
because Tyler, my neighbor's son, took it to his niece, and she was ecstatic.
Great.
Yeah, it's just a beautiful bunny.
Thanks, Debbie. We have 2 bunnies. Their names are Squirrel and Peanut. And they're just little tiny things. And they're cute. Anybody else have a story of what God did in their life this week? Demetria? No? No? You good? Tell us. You gotta speak into that thing.
Yeah, I've got a problem with speaking in anyone. Anyway, I've been doing a lot of work on my car, and I'm not saying that I'm the only one. My relationship with our Creator has been really something else, to the point where, I know I'm going to sound kind of a little off, but and it's my way of interpreting what transpired, how I perceived it. It's kind of like he messes with me. I couldn't find this oil leak. I had a very major oil leak in my car. And as a matter of fact, I took it apart, what I was told it was, and I fixed it, and it got worse, the oil leak, and I mean, bad, bad, bad. Worse than when it was before I even started. And it's my I got this thing about my trust, my faith is in you, Father. My trust, my faith is in you. I didn't let it, I was overwhelmed with what I had to do. I've never done it before. I'm going by guidance, just having trust and faith in God. And the third time that I had gone to take everything apart was looking for this leak. And I didn't find nothing. I went online, and it turned out that it was underneath the intake manifold. I know. Anyways, I like working with him. He's awesome. More people should have him in their lives, in what they're doing. I got nervous, but it's like his love just kept my cool. And I was having trouble, and I know it was him, because what I did was like miraculous to me. You know, it wouldn't come out, and then all of a sudden it just gave, and I had it. It was the drive for the oil pump, and it's underneath in this particular car, underneath the intake. And to me, that was major, all the wiring harness being pulled out. But I put it all back together, and I cranked it, and it started. No oil leak. To me, it was major, you know. And the best part was, again, working with him, involving him in what I was doing. I could feel his backup. I could feel him telling me what to do. That little part, as a matter of fact, that where the problem was, that one time prior that I had taken it all apart, something kept catching my eye about that little part, and it ended up being what I needed, where the problem was. We just have to listen, and our lives can be very wonderful. And the things that I even say sometimes, Father, you're messing with me. I love you so much, though. And I call him a show-off. And I tell him, because of the way he does things, the way he is in my life, the way things get done, it's like, you just got to have that trust and faith in him, and he'll pull you through. Love you, Father.
So without the Sabbath, without the day that we can stop and think about what has happened throughout the whole week, we can get into a rhythm where we don't realize how much God is working in our lives. A simple thing, I mean, it was a miracle to you to just working on your car, or a rabbit being found. Those are things that we can attribute to God. I mean, God is working in our lives. And sometimes we'll go months or years and not even stop and rest and think about, what is God doing in our life? What is God really doing in our life? Well, today is the day. Today is the day that we stop, we have Sabbath, and that we rest, and we think about what God has done in our life. Let's look at some things that Jesus did on the Sabbath. And Jesus was a rebel. So let's start with Luke 4:16. Luke chapter 4, verse 16. Now, I want to give you a little bit of background that happened before this part of Luke. Right before this was the time that Jesus, our Son of God, had been in the desert for 40 days. And, we don't know exactly what happened day to day with Jesus in the desert, but he was facing a really hard time. And he was tempted by the devil, and he resisted that temptation. As fully human and fully God, he was able to resist it. So when he comes back to Nazareth, where it was his hometown. It says he came back to Nazareth, where he had been brought up. And in his custom was he went to the synagogue on the Sabbath day and stood up to read. So after 40 days of just torture and being tempted, he comes and has Sabbath, and he teaches. He stood up to read, and he was handed the book of the prophet Isaiah, and when he had opened the book, he found the place where it is written, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to heal the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and recovery of sight to the blind, to set at liberty those who are oppressed, to proclaim the acceptable year of the Lord." Then he closed the book and gave it back to the attendant and sat down. And the eyes of all who were in the synagogue were fixed on him. And he said to them, "This day the scripture is fulfilled in your hearing." So all who bore witness to him and marveled at the gracious words which proceeded out of his mouth, and they said, "Is this not Joseph's son?" And he said to them, "You will surely say the proverb to me, 'Physician, heal yourself.' Whatever we have heard done in Capernaum, do also here in your country." Then he said, "Assuredly I say to you, no prophet is accepted in his own country. But I tell you truly, many widows were in Israel in the days of Elijah, when the heaven was shut up 3 years and 6 months, and there was a great famine throughout all of the land. But none of them was Elijah sent except to Zarephath, in the region of Sidon, to a woman who was a widow. And the many lepers were in Israel at the time of Elisha the prophet, and none of them was cleansed except Naaman the Syrian." All of those in the synagogue, when they heard these things, were filled with wrath, and rose up and thrust him out of the city. And they led him to the brow of the hill on which the city was built, and they might throw him down over the cliff. And passing through the midst of them, he went his way. This is kind of going to see this pattern going on where Jesus does something on Sabbath, people get mad at him, they want to kill him, and he either escapes or puts them in their place. Let's look at Matthew chapter 12, verse 1 through 8. Matthew 12, verse 1. At that time, Jesus went through the grain fields on the Sabbath, and his disciples were hungry, and they began to pluck the heads of grain off the fields and eat them. And when the Pharisees saw it, they said to him, "Look, your disciples are doing what is not lawful to do on the Sabbath." But he said to them, "Have you not read what David did when he was hungry, he and those who were with him, how he entered the house of God and ate the showbread, which was not lawful for him to eat, nor for those who were with him, but only for the priests? Or have you not read in the law that on the Sabbath the priests in the temple profane the Sabbath and are blameless? Yet I say to you that in this place there is one greater than the temple. But if you had known what this means, 'I desire mercy and not sacrifice,' you would not have condemned the guiltless. For the Son of Man is Lord even of the Sabbath." Have you guys been thinking about what God has been doing in your life this week? Anybody else want to share what God has been doing in their life? On July 1st, I'll be opening my own business. I've worked at a dental lab for 11 years, and when I got out of dental laboratory school, I prayed to God. I asked God, I want to do the highest quality of work that there is to do in this field. And I learned really quickly that you need to be careful what you ask for. Because when you ask God for things like that, you don't realize how much God is going to put you through. And you don't realize what's good and what's just rite of passage and what is, the work that is entailed in order to do this. And so for the past 11 years, I've been apprenticing under a master, and it has been extremely difficult. The master that I've been learning under, it kind of reminds me of maybe some of the masters during the time of Michelangelo, or the time when they were the great Renaissance for the artists, where they made them maybe do 1,000 drawings before they even accepted one of their drawings, or maybe they did they made them sculpt a finger or a hand before they can sculpt the whole body. But there's a definite step-by-step procedure that you need to do in order to become very skilled at any type of work. And it's hard when you are first starting because you don't realize you want to go to step Z. You don't want to go A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You want to go from A to B straight to Z, right? But you don't realize that there's all these things that you have to learn. I heard this story of a arborist, someone that is an expert at cutting down trees. He could walk into a forest, he could look at a tree, and I don't know if this number was made up just for effect, but he said there's 128 things that I look at on that tree. 128 things on that tree? I see like bark and limbs and maybe some trees. He saw, I don't even know what he saw because he's the expert, but he probably saw the trees that were around it. He saw how the tree was growing. He saw if it was healthy or not. He saw how thick the bark was, and he knew exactly what he was doing. All he had to do was look at that tree, and there was 128 things that flashed through his head, and he knew exactly what he was doing. There's little things that we do, like working on a car, Demetria. Do you guys ever realize that when you step next to your car, there's about 200 things that you need to do in order for you to back out of your driveway and hit the streets. And we don't realize how long it took to learn all that. I mean, I don't know, I haven't taught any of my daughters how to drive yet, but those of you that have taught somebody to drive, they get into their car and they don't even look in their mirrors. They just start in reverse, right? Well, that's one thing. I mean, you have to know how to turn on the ignition properly, or maybe now you have to push a button. You have to know that there's gas in the car. You have to know that there's enough oil. There's a lot of things that go into it that we just don't think of. So there's a lot of work that God has planned for us, and whether or not we want to do it, God is going to put us through it. And part of my outlook on the Christian life is being focused, and God is going to put something in my path one day at a time, and I'm going to do it, and that's what God has planned for me. Let's look at another example of Jesus, his rebellion against the Pharisees. Luke chapter 13, verse 10. Luke chapter 13, we're going to read verse 10 to 17. So, again, you can guess what's happening here. He was teaching in one of the synagogues on the Sabbath. And behold, there was a woman who had the spirit of infirmity 18 years. and was bent over and could in no way raise herself up. But when Jesus saw her, he called her to him and said to her, "Woman, you are loosed from your infirmity." And he laid his hands on her, and immediately she was made straight and glorified God. But the ruler of the synagogue answered with indignation because Jesus had healed on the Sabbath. And he said to the crowd, well, first of all, we all know that it's against Sabbath law to heal on the Sabbath. That was a no-no. You're not supposed to do that. Yeah. Have something to say there, Don? Should I continue? Okay. Speak up if you have something. All right. So, Jesus healed this lady, and he said to the crowd, "There are 6 days on which men ought to work. Therefore, come and be healed on them, and not on the Sabbath day." The Lord then answered him and said, "Hypocrite, does not each one of you on the Sabbath loose his ox or donkey from the stall and lead it away to water? So ought not this woman, being a daughter of Abraham, whom Satan has bound, think of it, for 18 years, be loosed from this bond on the Sabbath?" So Jesus was saying, what better time to be loosed from our, what are the things that they put on the ox, the yoke. We have these yokes on us, right? And the yoke might get heavier because we've got it on for 6 days. Or maybe we've had it on for 18 years. And what better day than to have this yoke released from us? Any other thoughts on good things God is doing in your life? This is the time to think about it. I know God is doing things in your life. Okay.
Your analogy of us going around for 6 days or whatever, and we have the yoke on, and all of our chores and stuff are getting heavier. But the world looks at us, at least I've run into quite a few people, thinking that we have this yoke on because we keep the Sabbath. And what you just described is completely inverse to that.
Yeah.
And I think most people go around this world like a chicken with his head cut off. That's not a very, very good visual, but it means, for some of us older people, we've heard that all of our lives. But we need, God designed us on that seventh day, like you said, to cut back. And there isn't anything more building emotionally, spiritually, physically, than reflecting on God on the Sabbath. I really believe that's his design. And if we reflect on God, we'll reflect on discussing that with other people, and it becomes a social endeavor, and thus we have that at church. But anyway, that's good.
That reminded me of another analogy I was thinking about. Back in the 70s, maybe Milton, you probably could tell the story a little bit better, but the supercomputers, they had to put them in, it took a room like maybe this size to house one of the computers. Yeah? No. Bigger? Yeah. And did you know that? And so what do we have nowadays that is faster than that computer? I mean, our phones just blow it away. I think it's like hundreds or thousands times faster than that computer. And so the way that Apple has their product set up is that, I use Apple products, so I'll just use that as an analogy. They sell a phone, and they give you options for the amount of say how fast it's going to go. They call it gigs. And you can get, say, like 100 or 200 or 300. And the more you get, the more expensive the phone is, right? But the more you get, the more you'll be able to, actually, we were talking about this last week. The more you get, the longer you can keep the phone because you're able to upgrade the latest software for it. If you don't have all of that memory in your phone, then you're not going to be able to upgrade it to the most current software. And so we are continuously upgrading, right? We want something faster and faster and faster. My question is, how much time in our lives is that saving us when we're getting something that's faster and faster and faster? I know there are ways that it's saving us maybe in our job that we can do things faster, but realistically, how much time in our lives is that saving us that we are just continuously wanting something faster and faster and faster? And this is just a phone analogy. It can apply to anything. You know, we want something that's better and better and better. And how much is it actually making our life faster or better or more comfortable? Just think about that. And let's look at another. This will be our final example of Jesus' rebellion. John chapter 5. Verse 1. We're going to read 1 through 16. John chapter 5. Verse 1. After this, there was a feast of the Jews, and Jesus went up to Jerusalem. Now there is in Jerusalem by the sheep gate a pool, which is called in Hebrew Bethesda, having 5 porches. In these lay a great multitude of sick people. There's blind, lame, crippled, paralyzed. They're all waiting for the moving of the water. For an angel went down at a certain time into the pool and stirred up the water. Then whoever stepped in first after the stirring of the water was made well of whatever disease he had. Now a certain man was there who had an infirmity 38 years. When Jesus saw him lying there and knew that he had been in that condition a long time, he said to him, Do you want to be made well? The sick man answered him, Sir, I have no man to put me into the pool when the water is stirred up, but while I am coming, another steps down before me. Jesus said to him, Rise up, take your bed, and walk. And immediately the man was made well, took up his bed, and walked. And that day was the Sabbath. The Jews therefore said to him who was cured, It is the Sabbath. It is not lawful for you to carry your bed. You guys catch that? They said, it's not lawful for you to carry your bed. This guy had been crippled for 38 years, and the first thing they notice is that he's carrying his bed. I mean, it just shows you the blindness of the Jews or the Pharisees and what their intentions were. He answered them, He who made me well said to me, Take up your bed and walk. Then they asked him, Who is the man who said this to you? Take up your bed and walk. But the one who was healed did not know who it was, for Jesus had withdrawn, a multitude being in that place. Afterward, Jesus found him in the temple and said to him, See, you have been made well. Sin no more, lest a worse thing come upon you. The man departed and told the Jews that it was Jesus who had made him well. For this reason, the Jews persecuted Jesus and sought to kill him, because he had done these things on the Sabbath. So just 4 instances, Luke, Matthew, John, they all talk about times when Jesus was doing things on the Sabbath that he wasn't supposed to do. So yeah. They had, it was the wrong idea of the whole thing, and it was backwards, pretty much, right? People don't act the way we think they ought to. Yeah. So what sets, yeah, go ahead. Good.
I think when Jesus was doing those things, he was, as we were talking earlier, we're to worship the Lord, and he was in communion worship. He was abandoned to the will of God. He couldn't, he walks so closely, and when he sees his children in need, that's his way of being, so to speak, to worship, is to give to his kids. And this morning I picked up a book I haven't read in a long time by Beth Moore on the life of David. And I just opened it up, and this happens so many times here at church, and I hear other people say it. Just the theme of whatever we're talking about seems to be the theme of the day. And it was about David. The chapter I read was when David danced before the ark. And he, the ark brought in, it was after the first time when they tried to bring the ark in, and I'm not going to remember the gentleman's name, the priest that died. Uzzah, thank you. And then after that, then it was not too long after that that David brought the ark in again. This time had all the priests carry it, stop, and they did this whole very ceremonial. He was trying to do, what was right, and yet in the midst of it, he was completely abandoned in his worship. And his whole focus was on the Lord, and he was dancing, and people and his wife looked at him, and instead of, like the Pharisees, rejoicing, oh my, this crippled man that's been crippled for 38 years is now walking, we should be celebrating. And instead of seeing their king who was worshiping the Lord, they're like, what on earth are you doing? You're an embarrassment. And I think it's the same. The Lord was doing, he was about doing his Father's work. He was completely abandoned. His life was worship. He was abandoned to that, so focused on it, and yet we stand back sometimes and we're so quick, because when you're not abandoned to something, the person that's abandoned to it looks crazy. They can look completely, off kilter. What on earth are you doing?
And he knew he was risking his life. I mean, not only did he know this, he knew it for a fact. He's God. So I'm going to get Lethea and then Debbie.
I didn't see a hand back there. That's the question, why we worship, why we praise. And things are always happening and you think, why? And I thought we worship and we praise because he alone is worthy. We find people all around us. People are found in the media and entertainment, blah, 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 and they get the accolades. They get the praises of humans. But God alone is worthy of that praise, of that adoration. And looking at this week, I was invited, and those who see my stuff on Facebook saw my picture of where I was down on the Rogue River. I had been invited to come down there for the last 3 years. couldn't go, didn't go, wanted to go, said no. And this year I decided that I would go. Girlfriend from Academy had moved up from Sacramento, bought a beautiful place they'd been restoring, renovating, and everything. Didn't even know what they had when they bought it. They'd been trying to buy something on the left, something on the right, and both of those fell through, and they looked at the one in the middle and said, yes, this is it. And when they opened it up, they had the most magnificent access to the Rogue River that they did not even know that they had. And I decided I was going to go, and went feeling just wiped out. And it was a time for restoration. How many, we have Debbie. Debbie is this kind of person. Friends are invited over, and she ministers to them. We have that from Debbie. My friend Rose, when kids start out from school, you don't know which way their lives are going to go. You don't know which ways you are going to go. And I asked her, I said, did you see yourself opening your home to being a hostess? I mean, people come from everywhere. They've got these combination locks, so you can call them and say, hey, I'm passing through. They give you a combination to come in their house and feel restored. I actually gained weight this week. I've been trying to, but I did, because she made sure I ate 3 meals every day from Tuesday till yesterday. But the thing that was important about that, we planned stuff to do, nothing worked out. But one thing that she had been committed to do before I decided I would go, was go see another friend of ours who graduated, I think she was a junior my sophomore year, which made her a couple years even older than the friend that I went to see. So we went down to Jacksonville, on down past Grants Pass, and just met her in that town. And, when we're going through life and we're in our ism and in our things, we don't realize the hurt and things that our friends are experiencing. And we see them walking away from what we think is the perfect ism, and, oh, they're going to hell, they're going to be lost, da, 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 da. We don't know the story. And God sent us there, me in my recovered state, to meet a friend who is still recovering, to meet with another friend who is still recovering from the things that happened in the isms, and to find out now, under normal circumstances in my life, and I'm going to take a minute to tell the story because this is judgmental Susan sitting right here. In normal circumstances in my life, if you told me, meet me at so-and-so's bar and grill, I'm saying, you're nuts. I'm going there. But we were meeting in her territory, and it was a place where she was comfortable. It wasn't a bar and grill. It was somebody's Italian thing. We walked through the bar-y part of it to the most gorgeous patio where we sat, all surrounded by old world things, and sipped on strawberry lemonade and talked about what God has been doing in our lives, where we were broken and how we are being restored. And she was coughing, and she leaned over and she said, don't worry, it's not contagious. I'm going to say this and let it go. But I have thyroid cancer. She'd already been through a cancer restoration. We wouldn't have known it if we hadn't gone. We were taking pictures here, there, everywhere. Some of them came out, some of them. We stayed up talking about our own journey. But we had a sister who was hurting. And we could have stayed and not taken the time to come aside and meet someone else who needed the comfort of her sisters. I look at the struggle, that scripture that said there was a widow, but there were many widows. There was a leper, but there were many lepers. One widow was used, one leper was healed. Why? They were open to receive that which God wanted to give them that day. And I think the thing for me this week, learning again to be open to the thing God wants to do in my life, through my life, just so that someone can be blessed, that I can get outside of myself. My struggle, my yoke is easy, and my burden is light. He takes the yoke off every Sabbath that I choose to come aside and rest a while. I just ask that you pray for Rose, that you pray for Anita, that whatever the ism did to them, they let it go, and that they remain secure in the love that they have for Christ, that they will always have the thing that they need, and that when we come across those who are hurting, we let go of our thing so that they can have what they need. I came home totally refreshed because someone decided to minister to me, and we were able to minister to someone else. May I be the Elijah that God can use for the widow and for the rest.
It was Rose and Anita. Rose has the thyroid cancer. Anita has a cancer. Okay. Keep them in our prayer. Anyone else?
You know, on Sabbath worship, you know, there's a theme that runs through all of these things that Jesus did on Sabbath. You know, in the Old Testament it says, don't do your own pleasure on Sabbath. Jesus was not doing his own pleasure on Sabbath. He was pleasuring others. And I think that's what we are to do on Sabbath, is to pleasure others and forget ourselves. And that's what true worship really is.
It's been a long time since I did this word study, but I looked up worship and went clear back and looking at the Hebrew quite a while ago. And it's to be prostrate on your face. And I thought that's the most submissive. You don't have any control. You can't see. You can't. Your fate. You're out of the picture. So it's like what you were saying. It's not about a day for what I desire to do, but it's a day to give to the Lord and to give to others on behalf of the Lord.
Is this good? What did we thought about Sabbath? I mean, whenever I dig into the word like this, I mean, I'm the first one to admit I'm learning new stuff. And you guys are teaching me new things every Sabbath. And it's a great reason to come and spend time with the church. It's just that you learn from the other people in the church. So let's go ahead and close on that, and Ron and I are going to sing one more song. Yes. This is my victory. reflect back